UFC Fight Night Cannonier versus Imavov is coming up this weekend, and I'll be giving you my predictions and breakdown for every single fight on the card and all the best moments on the card. Kicking it off with Rayanne dos Santos versus Puja Tomar. Now, Tomar, she's on a 4-fight win streak at the moment coming into the UFC, and dos Santos is coming off a loss, which I do think she won that fight. But when you look at Tomar and her win streaks, I mean, she pretty much has only fought cans, to be honest. And she's coming in, and when you look at her and her win streak against these cans, before that, any of the higher base competition that she has fought, she's lost against. She's had a pretty bad run in one championship. She's gone 1-3 with one decision win, and then every loss in her career has been by a finish, which is mainly down to a defensive grappling issue. And the issue with that stylistically in this fight is that dos Santos' best part of her game is her submission game. It's her strongest area. She's got 8 career wins by submission, and she's got the experience with better competition compared to Tomar as well. Aside from Tomar fighting Stamp Fairtex, but she got completely dominated in the first round in that fight. She just got ground and pounded out. When you look at dos Santos, she, at least in her last fight, she showed very decent forward pressure and she has pretty good power. She does kind of swing wild, but she still does have the power there. And if she dictates the pace, I think she'll probably win this one pretty easily. And I think it's kind of just a ploy from the UFC when it comes to Tomar. I mean, bringing her in is just an attempt from the UFC to expand their roster geographically, you know, being the first Indian female fighter in UFC history. But I just don't think that ploy is actually going to work out. I think that dos Santos will take this one fairly decisively, especially with that size difference. When you're coming from one championship, a lot of the time, a lot of these female fighters that are in straw weight are more so atom weight when they're coming from one championship. So I definitely assume there's going to be a size difference. It's going to be pretty visibly identifiable when we actually watch them fight. And Tomar on the regional scene and what we've seen from one championship, she does look pretty small anyway. And yeah, with that, I've definitely got dos Santos by an armbar submission win in this one. She's got a pretty consistent run with armbar finishes throughout her whole entire career. So I do think that she'll get the better of this one stylistically. Moving on to Cody Stamann versus Taylor Lapilus. This one, it's definitely one of my favorite fights, I'd say, on the card. I think Cody Stamann, I mean, yes, he's old, but he is well-rounded and he's always pretty game in fights. I think he makes it pretty entertaining with the pace that he sets. But then you've got Lapilus, who is a very technical sniper. He has very nice straight shots, very nice jab. And I mean, when you have an extremely long reach like that 8.5-inch reach advantage in comparison, that's where it's going to cause Stamann to have a lot of issues. Lapilus is going to rack up a lot of points when it comes to his jab. I think the jab is probably, honestly, I think it's going to get him a decision win here. When you look at Stamann's best chance is to get the fight to the ground. As when you look at submission threat from Lapilus, yes, he's 6-0 with submissions, but all of his submissions have come from early on in his career. They're not against any top competition. That doesn't mean he can't get them, but when Cody Stamann is better than any of the fighters that he has fought and actually won against with those submission wins. And it's just going to be hard for Cody Stamann anyway to get him to that point, because Taylor Lapilus does have pretty decent takedown defense. He showed that against Caroline Loughran in his last fight, or in his second last fight, aside from Basharat. So there is an issue there, I think, for Cody Stamann in terms of being able to get him to the ground. But if he does get him to the ground, I think that he can find a lot of success, because Lapilus, yes, he has good takedown defense, but he does not have good get-ups. Once he's down, he does struggle to get back up. And if you have any form of wrestling pedigree, like Cody Stamann, then I think that that's going to work to his advantage. But when we look at Lapilus, he's never been finished. And he did, as I said, he lost to Farhad Basharat in his last fight. But losing to Farhad Basharat, I mean, Farhad is very dominant in that division. And I mean, he'll be looking at top 15, I reckon, pretty soon if he keeps going the way he's going. And when you look at the Farhad Basharat fight, that fight was won because Basharat had about 6 to 7 minutes of control time. He was dominating Lapilus on the ground in terms of being able to control him. And that was once he got him to the ground. That's when he started actually, the fight really started slipping away from Lapilus. So anything that Cody Stamann can do to get it to the ground and keep it there, that's what he needs to do. That is 100% his best chance. And I mean, there is a possibility for Stamann if he can, use that, get on the inside, use that clinch striking, use that boxing, that tight, like phone box boxing. But I think aside from that, Taylor Lapilus just has those advantages on the feet. He's just a sniper. He's got good kickboxing and very good 1-2s as well. And when it comes to that 8.5 reach advantage, I think it is going to be a pretty long day for Cody Stamann. But I think that Lapilus will be able to stuff most of those takedowns, and I think he's just technical enough to make sure that he doesn't get in those needless clinch exchanges. And I think he'll just outpoint him on the feet, to be honest. Moving on to Eduarda Moura versus Denise Gomes. Eduarda Moura is very well-rounded. She has won 9 of her fights out of 10 by finish. And a lot of momentum too. She's, 10-0, and, she missed weight by 4 pounds in her last fight, but I don't honestly know really when it comes to like women's strawweight division. I don't know if they even really care about it, to be honest. But she's in her prime age as well. And then you've got Denise Gomes, she's pretty good. She's got KO power, but she has lost almost half of her UFC fights. And she's young. She's very young. A lot of room for improvement, but I don't think this is the fight to really improve upon in terms of getting a win. She's fought the better opponents. She's fought Yaragui. She's fought Angela Hill. That being said, though, those fights are great, but she's still very young in her career. And looking at Moura, she's in that prime age. She's a finishing machine. And I think it is going to be a very tough test for Gomes to actually get through this fight. I think it'll be interesting to see how Moura does fight if she actually makes weight, though, because she was 3 or 4 pounds over in her last fight against Canejo. But if she cuts down, because she was big in that fight, I don't know if it's just Canejo being like tiny. She looks like she should be an atom weight if it ever existed, which probably won't in the UFC. But when it comes to that fight, if it would be interesting to see if there was any difference if she did cut that 3 to 4 pounds to see if the cardio would be affected and the finishing potential especially would be affected if she did cut those extra pounds off. So we just have to wait and see with that when it comes to the weigh-ins. But obviously you can't really rely on that. So I think in terms of just like skill-based overall, I think Eduarda Moura is going to get this one done. And I think she's going to get it done by a submission win. I think just based on her ground transitions and the way that she's able to get into those favorable positions to land some ground and pound, I think that is one of her best traits. And especially when it comes to that strawweight division, she just naturally is a bit bigger. 5'6" is pretty big for strawweight. And it's going to be interesting to see how long she actually lasts at strawweight. I think she'll have to move up to flyweight at some point, especially the older she gets. So, she's got to take the advantage while she can. But I think I'm going to go with Moura with the late submission win. I think just her ground pressure, her transitions, I just think that they're going to be able to overwhelm Denise Gomes. Moving up to John Castaneda versus Daniel Marcos. Daniel Marcos, very high output technical striker, and he has very good striking defense as well. He's very defensively sound and offensively sound as well. He's just good at stand-up, to be honest. Whereas when you look at Castaneda, he is very well-rounded, and he does have the fight experience over Daniel Marcos. And I will say that Castaneda, in one of his last fights, he definitely shows that he's got sneaky striking. He's got very sneaky striking. He throws a head kick up with not much like telegraph, and he's got good power along with it too. So you can't count him out in that sense. He's 8-2 with KOs. So, you can't count him out in terms of, that striking, that power capability, even if Daniel Marcos is that composed. It was against Santos. That's right. It was against Santos. He dropped him he dropped him multiple times actually in that fight, I think. I'm trying to remember it, but I'm pretty positive he dropped him a fair few times, and in the first round he dropped him with a head kick. Obviously Dos Santos came back and did win that fight, but it shows that there is that power threat there. But the thing with Castaneda is that he struggles to deal with those technical fighters like Santos and like when he fought Nathaniel Wood. The issue there stylistically in terms of this fight is that Marcos is that technical fighter. He has the ability to avoid those power shots that Castaneda has. He's very good at being very evasive. He's good at circling outside, and he's good at stuffing takedowns, and I do think he will pull a decision win out of this fight. When it comes to the actual fight, I think, like, when you look at Marcos' style, he does take a bit of time to get the reads, and he is a bit of a slow starter. So I think Castaneda can pull off some pretty good shots at the start. But then I think Marcos will then take over in the second and the third round, and I think he'll probably pull out a 29-28 decision. Moving on to Andrea Lee versus Montana De La Rosa. When we look at these two, they both fought back in 2019, and Andrea Lee did get a decision win, and I honestly think that it's just going to go the exact same way. Andrea Lee is more of a complete fighter compared to De La Rosa. When you look at De La Rosa, she does have a pretty decent ground game, but not very good striking. I don't think her striking is that great. When you look at the takedowns, I would say I'd probably put that in Montana De La Rosa's favor, but I don't think that Andrea Lee has that bad a takedown defense, to be honest. When it came through to like their second and third round of their first fight, Andrea Lee was stuffing most of those takedowns, to be honest. And I think that when you look at Andrea Lee, she has that Muay Thai base there, and I think that will get her through to a decision win. She's just a bit better at shot selection than De La Rosa, and I think when you look at De La Rosa and when she strikes, she tends to more so wing her shots, which then she can overextend. And if she overextends against someone with a Muay Thai base, you can easily just run straight into a knee to the body. You can run into an elbow. So yeah, I do think that Andrea Lee is just going to accumulate more damage overall in this fight. And she just has the higher output as well. She's a bit better at pressuring too. And she was doing a lot of pressuring in their first fight. She was just marching her down. I honestly think that, yeah, I just don't really see Montana De La Rosa being able to get it to the ground, keep it on the ground, and really find any form of submission win there. I honestly do think that, I mean, they've both got pretty good submission bases as well. And yeah, realistically, I see Andrea Lee winning this one. I don't think it'll be like a super fun fight or anything like that. I just see Andrea Lee walking away with a decision on this one, to be honest. Moving on, Brad Katona versus Jesse Butler. So Butler, when you look at him, I mean, he's got the physical advantages with the height and the reach. But this is honest. I think this is tough. I think it's tough for him, to be honest. I think coming into the UFC for Jesse Butler, he's gone against Jim Miller where he got decapitated, and now he's gone to Brad Katona. And I think it sucks for him because he's having to face really annoying fighters in terms of just like their styles and their experience and everything. I mean, when you look at Jim Miller and Brad Katona, they're veterans, they're very crafty. I think that's the best word for it. They're just extremely crafty for someone that hasn't fought any form of UFC experience before. And having to fight both of them on his debut and then second fight is just, I think it's pretty rough. But I do think as well, when it comes to Jesse Butler, I think that his weight cut is going to be an issue. I think that the weight that he is fighting at, being at bantamweight, I think this is going to be an issue because if you look through Butler's career, he's fought at welterweight, lightweight, featherweight, and now bantamweight in the space of 17 fights. Like, that's not that many. So he hasn't really... That's giving a kind of tell that he hasn't solidified himself in an actual division yet, and he's not comfortable. And that's an extremely big issue when you're going against someone that's a crafty veteran and that shows a very, very well-rounded game like Brad Katona, who's gone through The Ultimate Fighter twice, and I've never seen him slow down. He's got a very good gas tank, and he's got a very good chin as well. He's never been defeated. He's never been finished. And yeah, when you look at Jesse Butler, I think his gas tank and his chin are probably going to be compromised from the weight cut. And it's just not good when you're going against a high output pressure fighter like Brad Katona. And I understand Katona only has one KO finish on his record, but I honestly think here is a perfect opportunity for him to get another one. I think when you look at Butler, his strength, obviously, 8-0 with submissions. Like he's got that submission ability there, but we need to see how he's actually going to get it to that area. We need to see how he's going to get it to the ground, because he doesn't have a very good takedown threat from what I've seen. And I don't see him being able to take Katona down, Katona has a lower center of gravity. He's got a stronger base. And yeah, Butler's just going to have to catch him out by overcommitting, or just, wrapping around to the back. I don't know how he's going to do it, but if he does it, it's extremely impressive. I definitely do not have him in this fight, hence the odds. And honestly, I just don't see how Katona loses this fight unless Butler puts on some kind of striking clinic and just pieces him apart with the jab and just teep kicks up the middle to take out his gas tank. But honestly, after Brad Katona's last tough win, the last tough final he had, I mean, that was a war, and he did not slow down, and there was so much output in that fight. So I just don't see Jesse Butler really doing anything for him. And Katona, I mean, he's had the better experience. I mean, he's submitted Bryce Mitchell, and he had at least through the first half of the fight, he had a very competitive fight with Moura Dvalishvili. I honestly think that Butler is just going to have a weak chin from the weight cut, and so I do think that Katona is going to get that KO TKO finish, probably more so later on after getting a few reads and just, piecing him up a bit. Moving up, Charles Radtke versus Carlos Prates. Radtke, I mean, he looked pretty good. He's looked pretty good in the UFC so far. He's gone 2-0. Almost getting 2 finishes. He almost took out Blood Diamond at UFC 293. But Prates, he's got a very good Muay Thai base with a heap of experience. And when you look at his Muay Thai records as well, he has like over 100 fights. And in this fight, he's got a 6-inch reach advantage as a Muay Thai style fighter. To go with it, he's had 2 wins in the UFC, which have been both of them have been pretty brutal KOs. And Prates as well, when you look at this, not only his arm reach, he has almost a 4-inch leg reach advantage as well, which is very important because he's someone that fights sort of similar to like Chris Gutierrez. He uses the front kick as a jab. He uses that as a jab to then set up his power leg straight up to his power shot straight afterwards. I mean, the left hand of his is pretty vicious. And I just think that he's, even in his last fight, he's very composed. I think he'll just do a good job of controlling the pace. He's just got so many weapons that he can set up. When he fought Trevin Giles, I mean, he set up all his weapons extremely well against Trevin Giles and then just laid him out cold with that left straight. I think that, with that kind of experience that Prates has compared to Charles Radtke, and if you compare Charles Radtke to Trevin Giles, Trevin Giles just has a lot more experience against tougher competition. Trevin Giles has fought he fought Dricus du Plessis, and he fought Roman Dolidze as well, so he's fought up there in that division. He's just Trevin Giles is a lot better than Radtke in terms of just that caliber of fighter, I'd say, at this point in time. But the only thing it's kind of hard trying to find things for Radtke. I mean, Radtke, if he does get the fight to the ground, he might have a chance of getting a submission win there. He's 2-0 with his submissions, but I don't like his overall chances, to be honest. And I think that Radtke could find some success in the first round, but then I do think that Prates is he's kind of a slow starter as well. I do think that he might take a little bit of time to actually get started, and then I think he'll start really finding his rhythm, and then he'll find a finishing shot late by TKO, I think. Moving on to our feature prelim, Thiago Moises versus Ludovit Klein. Now, this is one of my favorite ones. I really like this matchup. I think it'll be very technical. They've both been fairly active. I mean, they've got like a fair bit of experience, especially Thiago Moises as well. I mean, he's fought like everyone. He's fought Benoit Saint Denis, he's fought Islam Makhachev, he's fought Bobby Green, he's fought fair few others as well. But when you look at Thiago Moises, I mean, I would edge the grappling to him, but when you look at Ludovit Klein, definitely has the stand-up threat here, honestly. Klein has very, very nice boxing, and I mean, when you look at his fight against Ignacio Bahamondes, he outstruck him completely. And Bahamondes is, honestly, he's no joke, especially at his age. He's got very nice kickboxing, very lengthy. He's got the power along with it. And yeah, Ludovit Klein was just having his way with him, to be honest. And when we look at that comparison of Ludovit Klein's boxing, and then we look at Thiago Moises, when he fought Benoit Saint Denis, he struggled against Benoit Saint Denis' boxing, which, don't get me wrong, Benoit Saint Denis is an absolute beast, but it is safe to say that Benoit Saint Denis' weakest point is his boxing. Dustin Poirier. But when you look at Klein, he's the one that's got the boxing advantage. He's got a boxing style base. He's got better boxing than Benoit Saint Denis. I can definitely say that. And he has very good power and very good precision along with it as well. And as long as Klein doesn't overcommit and get taken down, because obviously Moises has that versatile ground game and experience against better opponents than Ludovit Klein, like Islam Makhachev. As long as he's not doing that, he doesn't make that mistake, I think he'll be pretty safe on the feet. Like, I'm not counting Moises out completely on the feet. I mean, he's strong. He has nice leg kicks, that's for sure. He hurt Bobby Green with his leg kicks a lot when they fought. I definitely saw that. And yeah, I think that he does have some chances on the feet, but ever since Ludovit Klein moved up to lightweight, he's just looked more and more impressive. He's undefeated at lightweight. I mean, his last loss was against Nate the Train Landwehr. That was by an anaconda choke. And yeah, ever since then, he's looked fantastic. He's like an absolute weapon at lightweight. And honestly, I think just between the boxing accuracy and the pressure and his momentum as well, and especially the biggest part, the technical advantage on the feet, I think he might find a late finish or possibly a unanimous decision, which I'm more inclined to go with a unanimous decision, mainly because Thiago Moises just has that much experience. I mean, he's fought absolute killers, and I think he's crafty enough to get out of there without getting finished. Moving on to the main card, Miguel Baeza versus Punahele Soriano. Don't really know why these guys are on the main card, to be honest. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of the other fights that are on the prelims that could have been over this fight, to be honest. I mean, you've got the Stamann versus Lapilus, put that ahead of this. Katona's fight, definitely Ludovit Klein versus Moises. I'd put those ahead of it. I understand they need a feature prelim, but I mean, still, in comparison, I don't rate this fight, to be honest. Both of these fighters, they're on losing streaks at the moment, and I think they're both very close to getting cut from the UFC. I think whoever loses this honestly could get cut from the UFC, and it's kind of weird to see that because, you know, both of these guys, they're coming out of very good gyms. You know, you've got Baeza, who's coming out of MMA Masters. MMA Masters has got like Colby Covington, Nate Landwehr, Temba Garimbo. And then, you know, when you look at Soriano, he's coming out of Extreme Couture. And out of Extreme Couture, I mean, you've got Sean Strickland, you've got Chris Curtis, you've got Dan Ige. And, you know, Soriano used to fight at middleweight. So, you know, you've got a lot of experience within that same division there too. And I mean, you know, when it comes to those gyms, you'd expect these two to at least be getting some wins here and there. Obviously, I understand it depends on the fighters they're facing, but you'd think those game plans would be changed. But obviously, there might be personal things going on. Who even knows? But ultimately, yeah, I feel like when you're on that big a losing streak, names are pretty unknown. I don't know why they're on a main card, even of a fight night. Yeah, it's just very strange. Not as strange as putting Alex Morono versus Nico Price on the main card of 302. That was horrible, so please never do anything like that again, UFC. I'd rather Jailton Almeida on there for sure, and I know how many people in the MMA community feel like Jailton Almeida is boring as shit, so Yeah. Anyway, we'll go back to this fight. I mean, you got Baeza, who is he's been out for like 2 years now. I mean, he's been out and he hasn't been doing nothing. He's been doing some grappling here and there, but when you compare it to Soriano, yes, he's been losing just like Baeza has, but he's been active within the UFC. Last fought in December of last year. So he has been maintaining that activity, which is important. And I do see this fight ending with a KO finish. And I think I'll go with Soriano, just pretty much out of that consistency here. And, I feel like it definitely comes down to that consistent sparring that he's getting out of Extreme Couture. You've seen the success of those boxers that come out of that gym that Eric Nixick trains, especially Strickland. I mean, yeah, Curtis has had some tough fights recently, but I mean, Chris Curtis is extremely technical as a boxer. And also you have Dan Ige as well. I mean, Dan Ige's never been finished, and he is a fantastic boxer. So when you look at this fight and you look at looking at Soriano, yes, he's the underdog, but I wouldn't say it's a safe underdog pick. I think one of these guys is getting flatlined, but I think when it comes to that money line there, I wouldn't say it's a terrible underdog pick to actually go for. So yeah, I'll be going with this one. And honestly, to be fair, when it comes to Soriano, when he fought Stoltzfus, he did get submitted, but before he got submitted, I mean, he was showing pretty clean striking on the feet, mainly with his counter striking. So I feel like if Baeza can engage and overcommit, I think that he can get cleaned up by some counter striking. And Baeza, I don't think his chin's that fantastic, to be honest. So yeah, I do think that Soriano is going to take this one, but I wouldn't be surprised if, they both KO each other at the same time. Who even knows? But yeah, ultimately, I'm ranting, and this should just not be on the main card. Moving on, Julian Marquez versus Zachary Reyes. I reckon this one's pretty tough to pick. Because when you look at Marquez, he's only been KO'd by good strikers. He's been KO'd by Marc-Andre Barriault and Gregory Rodriguez. And then Zachary Reyes, pretty good up-and-comer. And he lost by like a freak slam KO by Cody Brundage. I don't know how much weight you put into that. But when you look at Marquez, he hasn't fought in about a year and a half, and he's coming off that Barriault loss. But honestly, if you watch that fight against Barriault, he actually looked very composed and technical in that fight and was pushing the pace throughout the whole entire first round and actually won it. And I definitely say Marc-Andre Barriault is definitely better than Julian Marquez and definitely better than Zachary Reyes. I feel like that's just coming down to Marquez fighting someone that's just a better caliber and has amazing stamina as well. That's why he did end up losing to Marc-Andre Barriault by TKO. But, there is that, that's skill difference there. But, you take that experience away from it. So, yeah, he fought someone there was a better caliber than him and had amazing stamina, which Zachary Reyes is not on that level yet. I think Brundage handled Reyes very well, like leading up to their finish anyway. I think he handled him very well on the feet, clipped him a couple times, and I see Marquez being able to do the same thing. And we gotta see how Zachary Reyes comes back from that slam as well. He got knocked out cold. Yeah, it was about 6 or 7 months ago, but still, it can change the mentality of a fighter when they get KO'd cold like that, and especially being so premature in their career. He's only got 7 fights in his whole entire MMA career, and he's 30. So, he's still fairly young. He's probably just entering those prime years. But yeah, ultimately, I do think that Marquez, just in terms of that technical striking capability, I'm going to give him the TKO finish in this fight. And I think he's going to probably get it done around the second round. I just think that experience against higher level opposition and that technical capability there and that composure is probably going to get this one done for him. Moving on, Bruno Ferreira versus Dustin Stoltzfus. Now, Stoltzfus, he's a pretty technical striker, and he does have the physical advantages compared to Bruno Ferreira. But Ferreira is he's just a bulldozer, to be honest. Like, he definitely has the KO power advantage here for sure, and I'm pretty positive he's going to find the mark. They both just don't have that great a strike defense, and if they both land at the same time, Stoltzfus is the one that's going to go to sleep. I'm pretty positive about that. Bruno Ferreira just has a lot of KO power, and he has a grappling base as well. So he's pretty sound on the ground. I mean, he's 3-0 with submissions, and Stoltzfus' best chance ultimately is to either outpoint him with the 3-inch reach advantage, or utilizing the front kicks, or is to out-grapple him. I mean, Stoltzfus does have pretty versatile submissions if you go through his career and you look at his submission wins and the method of submission. I mean, he has like 5 or 6 different types of submissions. So he does have that versatility there. So I wouldn't completely count him out into if it does go to the ground. He's more versatile on the ground than Ferreira is. But ultimately, I think that I just think he's going to pressure forward, cut him off from circling out. I think he's going to cut off the cage, and then I think he's just going to find the mark late in the first round and get a pretty brutal KO win. And with that win, I want to see an absolute death match with him against Roman Kopylov next. Moving on, Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Tercios. We'll actually see if we do get this fight. I mean, this fight's been I feel like it's been postponed either once or twice, and they've been talking a lot over social media. It's just just fight. But like, both of these guys, it's quite tricky to actually predict. I mean, they're pretty mirror matched. Stylistically, they're both pretty much the same. They both have a submission sweep kind of style. They transition a lot to try and find a decent submission or a decent position on the ground. And they both don't have the greatest striking, to be honest. Tercios, though, I will say his takedowns, like his timing on his takedowns, is probably the best part of his game. But the issue is against Rosas Jr. is that his submission versatility is much better than Tercios's, without a doubt. I think, it's one thing leading to another. Yes, Tercios has the takedown threat, but it's just going in. He's taking him down into Rosas's game, so I don't think he can really use it. And I would say that if it does stay on the feet, I would probably give the advantage to Tercios but I don't think either of them are that great on the feet, to be honest. But if Rosas gets this to the ground in any way, shape, or form, I definitely can see him getting the submission win here. I just think he's so versatile. He's very aggressive with his submissions. And I think within 15 minutes, and the way their styles work, they're both pretty aggressive. I do think Rosas can find the advantageous positions out of the sweeps and then get that submission opening. I think he will eventually be able to find it, and I think he'll be able to pull off that submission win. And I can definitely I honestly just don't like Tercios's ways of, when he gets the takedown, he just doesn't get into great positions where he gets himself in that advantageous part where he's like, taking the back, or, he's, I don't know, just controlling them in any way. And I think that that's just going to be a huge issue, especially if he takes Rosas down. Then I think Rosas is going to take this one, to be honest. Moving on to the co-main event, Dominick Reyes versus Dustin Jacoby. I think it's pretty fair to say at this point in their careers, they are both pretty chinny. But when you look at Jacoby, he is 12-1 when it comes to KO TKOs. And the reason why he doesn't have more losses in the KO/TKO department is mainly down to his recovery. I think that is the main reason why he hasn't been finished more. His recovery is very good. If you look at his last fight against Alonzo Menafield, he got rocked 3, 4, 5, possibly 5 times. I don't know. He got rocked a couple times, but he recovered extremely well and held that out to a decision. Yes, he lost, but it was still very impressive either way. But when you look at Dom Reyes in comparison when it comes to that recovery, Dom Reyes does not have that ability. I mean, at least not anymore. And I don't think he's the same fighter anymore. And I don't think he ever will be, to be honest, which is pretty sad. I mean, it's insane to see Dom Reyes, and just the fact that he went from arguably possibly beating John Jones, which a lot of people do think, to then going on a 3-fight brutal KO skid against Jan Blachowicz for the vacant. And then he lost to Yuri Prohaska with that spinning elbow from Satan. And then the jab from Ryan Spann. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's really rough to see Dom Reyes like this. And I just don't think a fight against a very seasoned kickboxer is the right way to go. I mean, he's just taken so much damage in the last 4 years since John Jones. And I just, I don't see it. I don't see this matchup faring any better for him, to be honest. I think that especially coming off that Ryan Spann fight where Ryan Spann just honestly just killed him. He needs some form of grappler to fight, which is unfortunate because he's at light heavyweight, and light heavyweight basically has absolutely no grapplers in it. They're all non-wrestlers. They're all just strikers. And I honestly think that, I really just don't see Dom Reyes getting out of this one alive, to be honest. I think Jacoby will find the TKO in the third round in this one. I think he'll piece him up a little bit at the start, not counting Dom Reyes out at all. I mean, he can do damage. I mean, he was at the top of the game beforehand, so he can still do things, but he is not the same fighter he used to be. And I think Jacoby will get this one done by a finish. On to the main event, Jared Cannonier versus Nassourdine Imavov. This one was a very tough one to pick, to be honest, especially when you look at Cannonier. Yes, he's been injured for a little bit, but him coming off the fight of his absolute life against Marvin Vettori, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's got the most amount of strikes in middleweight history now in a single fight. He just pieced Marvin Vettori up, absolutely disfigured his troll face. And honestly, it was, absolutely fantastic. So at least he's got that form of momentum there. Hopefully the injuries didn't do too much to him. But we got to point out the obvious here when it comes to Jared Cannonier. Cannonier is 12 years older than Imavov and is now 40 years old. So it does make the fight against Vettori even more impressive, especially being at middleweight. You know, they're not that heavy. They still need a fair bit of stamina. They still have to rely on more stamina than KO power at that level. So very, very impressive from Jared Cannonier. But comparatively, when you look at Imavov compared to Vettori, Imavov is a lot more technical than Vettori. So they're both of them are very technically sound. They both have similar outputs at around 4.5 strikes landed per minute, but Imavov is definitely more defensively sound out of the two of them. And aside from losing to Phil Hawes by a majority decision, when Hawes actually, had somewhat of a chin and some promise, Imavov had only lost to Strickland, and Strickland is at the top of the game. Probably the best jab in MMA, very, very clean boxer, and he's more technical than Imavov, and that's saying something because Imavov is honestly probably one of the most technical ones in that division. But Sean Strickland was 10 pounds heavier than Imavov in that fight. And, one judge gave him a 48-47 against a Sean Strickland who is better than him, who's fought way more than him, and weighed 10 pounds heavier. He looked way bigger than Imavov did. And, that's something to really take away from that. So Nassourdine Imavov does still have momentum there. And, Cannonier, when it comes to his striking, Cannonier has a very nice jab, and he does have the reach advantage here. So if he can really utilize that jab and dictate the pace himself, then he can find a lot of success. It's exactly what he did against Sean Strickland, and obviously what he did against Marvin Vettori to get those wins. And I think if he can do that, then there's definitely a very strong chance for Jared Cannonier. But when we look at Imavov, when it comes to their exchanges, Imavov has the speed advantage. And that's extremely important when it comes to the way they are both going to fight. And if it goes to the ground, Imavov has the grappling advantage there too. And if I'm Imavov, I would implement the takedown game as early as possible. I mean, Cannonier is explosive and he's stronger than Imavov, but if Imavov can get him down, he's very good at controlling his opponent's inside control. And if Jared Cannonier probably can explode out of it, which would be good for Imavov because that's going to drain Cannonier's gas tank more. And whoever gets tired in this matchup first will lose. 100%. It's just the way they're stylistically played out. You know, you can say that for any fight. Oh, you know, whoever's going to have the less stamina is obviously going to lose. But, I mean, that's where KO power comes in. I mean, some people can be absolutely gassed and then just completely destroy someone. That's like Chris Lieben back in the day. Chris Lieben he would gas himself out completely, but still knock people the fuck out. So, you know, but when it comes to this fight, both of these guys don't have, you know, super vicious, like one punch KO power. If you're going to give it to anyone, it'd be Cannonier. But yeah, that's where the gas tank really comes in, because I definitely see this fight going 5 rounds. But I think that I'm going to give it to Imavov, and I think that it's going to be extremely competitive, but I think it's going to be a 48-47 to Imavov. Moving on to our fight card awards, kicking it off with fight of the night. Going to give it to Thiago Moises versus Ludovit Klein. Aside from the main event, I think this one is probably the most competitive fight on the card, and I'm pretty annoyed and surprised that it's not on the main card. I don't know if it really has much more advantage to them, whether it is or not, but yeah, I mean, you got Klein with the boxing advantage, and he's looking amazing at lightweight, and then you've got Moises, who's got the grappling and experience advantage, so I think this will be one of the most technical fights on the card, and I do see us getting a lot of this fight because I do think it's going to go to the distance. Now, looking at performance of the night, got to give it to Brad Katona. I think his style and experience against Jesse Butler is just a golden opportunity to dominate with the forward pressure and outland him on the feet and then finish him later in the fight. Now, onto fighter to watch. It'll be good to see if Rosas Jr. can step up and take out a tough winner and add him to the resume for his 10th fight. And, you know, at 19, having that on your resume is realistically what you want. You know, he's popular in the UFC, but, you know, having accolades like that is just going to get him even further. And stylistically, I think this is a very good test for him because it is pretty much mirror matched. But yeah, I think this is good because, you know, Ricky Tercios does have that more experience based just in, you know, the UFC and going through the tough series and everything like that. So he's faced that adversity there. And yeah, I think this will just be a very fascinating fight, and it'll be good to see if Raul Rosas Jr. can get it done. Now, finish of the night. Bruno Ferreira. He just has a lot of power and the grappling to compete with Stoltzfus, and I think he gets inside, cuts him off, and chins him in the first or second round. And then he can hopefully fight Roman Kopylov in a guaranteed knockout matchup. That's just what I am praying for. Now, predicting that Cannonier versus Imavov is going to be a close fight. If you haven't already, check out my UFC 302 recap video where I look at Dustin Poirier and Islam Makhachev and talk about their fight that they've just had at UFC 302. It's just up here on the screen. And if you liked this video and you want to see more MMA based content, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.